I'm Edyta from Laundry Basket Quilts. Welcome to Quilting Window. I am so happy you took the time to quilt with me today. We're going to make a beautiful little spool block. The quilt behind me, called Variegated Thread, has quite a few of those blocks in it. When you know how to make a one, you can make a dozens for table runners, quilts, to decorate your beautiful sewing room. I love the quilt behind me because it's made with one of my favorite collection called Linen Texture. Don't get confused, it's not linen fabrics. It's just the print on the fabrics look like a linen. So it's a beautiful fabric that you can mix with any of your quilting fabrics and enjoy in your projects. Let's see what I have in my quilting basket today for you. Oh, there's so many fun goodies. We're gonna use our Sew Line pencil. That's gonna be one of the things we're going to use. I have included in my quilting basket our beautiful threads from Wonderful, and those threads have all different beautiful colors, and they're especially designed to match the linen texture fabrics, so they could work very well for us today. We're gonna use best press to press our fabric before we cut our strips for our spools, those little pieces. It's nice to use this product because it makes your fabric just tiny bit stiffer and it doesn't fray as much, the fabric doesn't fray as much as you're working on it. Of course, we're going to use and need a pattern. This pattern calls Variegated Thread, and it give you all the directions for cutting and everything you need to make the whole quilt. I'm gonna talk you through one block. You need that to make your projects. And of course, one bundle of fat 8s from Linen Texture would give us plenty of fabric to make all of the spools. You're gonna need a little bit more for a background, and I'm gonna talk to you in just a moment about those options. I also have few little essentials in my basket. My Macrotex needles, I'm gonna use those for my piecing. I love my little pins. Girls, if you do not have those in your stash, you need a little fresh box of pins. I'm gonna put them right next to me. And 2370 Orifel thread is one of my favorite for just traditional piecing. You can use that one as well. All right, so we have all these wonderful things in our sewing basket, and let's talk about the background fabric for our quilt. And your blocks could be made with any scraps. The background of your quilt will set the mood for the quilt. And there are a few options from the Linen Texture. I had them lined up from the lightest to the darkest. So I used this one for my background. It's really nice and light. Why did I do that? Because I want my quilt to be very sparkly, clean look. The colors, I want them to glow almost. You can change that to a little bit darker. Notice what happened to the blocks. It just settles down a little bit. The creamier one gives a nice feel, warm feel to it. And then I have two darker ones. One of them is modern quilter's favorite, and it's a gray. So any of those options would be wonderful. We have all of those available on our website, and this is what you're going to need the yardage for. I made the quilt 2 times. This is with Linen Texture. In the end of the show, I'm gonna show you a scrappy option as well, and for that option I use the batik from my background. All right, so we have wonderful fabrics that we're gonna work with it. Let's start by cutting. When you cutting from fat 8s or fat quarters, their cuts are gonna be shorter. The length of your strips only gonna be 21 inches. But sometimes you get to cut from full width of fabric, and I want to review that with you because sometimes that gives you a little bit of a trouble. So full width of fabric is 40 to 42 inches. This is selvage edge to selvage edge. When I get my fabric, I place it selvage edge to selvage edge, and then I go ahead and fold it one more time just like this, and I place that folded edge next to the salvage edge. I smooth it up with my hands, make sure that everything is nice and even. Then I go ahead, grab my ruler and my rotary, and I prepare my fabric for cutting. I'm gonna start by trimming that edge. I already did that. I trim off this edge right here, and when I trim the edge, I always remember to make sure that I take my ruler, lay it next to the edge, but I'm not matching with the edge. I'm watching for this line right here. Do you see this line right here? I want to match that line with the fold. Why do I do that? Because when I trim this off, and later on when I cut my strips, I get a nice straight strip, not a zigzag. If you don't do that and you just do something like this and you don't match it, you're gonna get not a nice strip. So I already trimmed it. Now let's go ahead and start cutting strips. So I'm following this beautiful edge that I trimmed it, and I go ahead and I cut. And this is a one way of cutting. You can just go ahead and cut it by measuring whichever width you want it. For our block we need 1-inch strips. So one, I have my first strip, then I go ahead and maybe cut another one. Depends how many of that same fabric I want. Sometimes I like to exchange my strips with my friends. So I cut extra 5-6 strips and ask my girlfriends if they want to exchange. That gives me more fun variety of fabric. If you have not done a fabric exchange, I encourage you to do it, because it's the best way to see a lot of different variety of fabrics. If I'm cutting more than one strip, I like to follow different technique for cutting. I take my ruler, I place it right on my fabric, just like this. Remember, match the straight line right here with that bottom folded edge. And now what I'm going to do is I'm gonna make a cut, and I'm cutting at 4 inches. I'm gonna move my ruler down to 3, cut it again, move my ruler down to 2, cut it again, and then back to 1 and cut it again. That way I go back and keep cutting and have a really nice strips. Why do I do that? To go this way, because the whole time I have my hand right on a ruler and I can protect that fabric that I'm planning to cut and make a really nice cuts. So we review 101 cutting. Now we are ready for our next step, what is selecting our fabrics for our first spool panel. What do I mean by that? I would take my piece and go ahead and I cut my piece in half. I only want to work with a half a strip. So at this moment, those fat eighths or fat quarters would have been that size, the 20 to 22 inches. Only if you cut from a full width, you have to then section your pieces into 2. Why am I doing this? Because sometimes when the strip is really long and I am sewing 2 strips together, there is a long distance that I can make mistakes. It's easier for me to work with a shorter strip, not only for my piecing, but also for my pressing. So 20 to 22 inches is something I feel comfortable with. I have prepared a few strips already for us, and I'm so super excited about that. They are just beautiful. So all of those strips are 20 to 22 inches length, 1 inch width. So what I'm going to do is now I need for one spool 8 of those strips. Why 8? Because I have 8 strips in one scrappy panel right here for the body of my spool. In this case I was using my linen textures and going with a little bit of a rainbow arrangements, or just color coordinating them from reds to pinks to yellow. On my table I have a scrappy option for you, so any fabric goes. You can choose whatever you have in your stash. And now I'm gonna start laying my fabrics out just to see how they look with each other, what's going on here, and I will selected 8 beautiful strips to work with. So I always do that, preparing, just looking what is going on, one after the other. Oh, this is lovely. I'm gonna remove this one. It looks like it doesn't fit that well. So I'm gonna put it to the side. Maybe in my next color combination it would work. Oh, what do I watch for? I look for clues in my fabrics when I pair them up to one set. Notice, for example, I have this honey yellow right in here. It's perfect with this fabric. This is a batik, this is a printed fabric. I still gonna put them together. I love mixing and matching all my fabrics. When I choose my fabrics for my quilt, I use rule of 5. Big print, medium print, stripes, polka dots, small print. So those the rule that I use. So those give me a fun variety. This big print is gonna give me a fun colors. Notice how that little green pulls it from this fabric. Let me add a little red to warm things out. I'm not afraid of my striped fabric. When I cut it, I put my fabric this way, so that way I'm not fighting with the strips that are going back and forth. And another thing that I'm paying attention to it as I'm lining my fabric is also where my salvage edge is. I keep my cut edge on one side and a salvage edge on the other side. Why am I doing this? Because all my straight cut edges are exact the same, and my salvage edge are a little bit more ragged because the fabric is all different width. So when I need to trim later on, I just trim this off and it's gonna work wonderful for me. And also this is gonna be guide for me to remember where to start sewing and where I need to start next time. Let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, I have already 8. I don't need this strip in a set. We only need 8. I look at it one more time. I don't stress about it too much. I get to do multiple color combinations from my panels. So I'm pleased with the way how this one look. Let's start sewing. We're gonna place a Macrotex needle in our sewing machine. We're gonna put a cotton thread in a bobbin, cotton thread on the top of our sewing machine. And one of the most important parts right now is we're going to make the length of our stitches a little bit closer together. From 2.5 go down to 1.5, 1.8, just tiny bit closer together. Why am I doing that? Because when I sew my strips together to one panel, later on I'm planning to cut that panel into smaller section. So if I use a big stitch, my seam's gonna fall apart. Using a smaller stitch allows the pieces to hold nicely together, to I assemble my spool block, and everything will work great for me. So now I just put my thread in my sewing machine and I'm gonna sew first set of 2. I'm going to sew sets of 2, so this and this will go together, this and this will go together, this and this and this and this. And a little advice, when I would like to remember where to place my colors, I snap a quick picture with my phone, and that way I know which fabric goes where. So by the time I go to my sewing machine, then pressing, I don't forget the order of my strips. So snapping a quick picture when you create your color combination would be wonderful. I'm gonna take first 2 strips together just like this, and notice this is my cut edge. I'm gonna place the fabric right sides together. Oh wow, this is gonna be wonderful, wonderful. And notice, because I press all my fabric before I cut it, it really acts nice. It's not pulling and not stretching. It's great. Now I'm gonna zoom, 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 sew it together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I will repeat this 4 times, 4 sets of 2 strips. As soon as I sew 4 sets of 2 strips, I'm gonna go ahead to my ironing board and I'm going to press it. Now a little clue. Pay attention to that salvage edge on your fabric. Keep that salvage edge on your left side. I'm right-handed, so my clean edge is always on my right side. So the salvage edge is on my left. That way, when you place your fabric on your ironing board, just like this, and you first press it down, then put this open and press it open, all the seam allowances will go in the same direction because you always have your salvage edge on the left and you're just pushing your fabric open. So first I'm just gonna press it nice, and then with the circular motions just like this, you need to press it right open. As soon as you're done, you're gonna have sets of 2. I'm gonna pull this back open. Then you take those sets of 2 and place this to sew it together. I start sewing on my first set from here to the salvage edge. On my second seam, I'm gonna go from my salvage edge down to my cut edge. The only thing you need to remember is match the cut edges, but start sewing from here. You don't want to match it here and things start going to be uneven on both sides. You always want to make sure that one side is nice and even. Start sewing, zoom, zoom, zoom. The same thing with your other set. So right here, this to this, and now you're gonna start sewing from here, all the edges nice and straight. Go and press, and 4 to 4 give us a perfect 8 strips sewn together for a beautiful panel. And I have one ready, set, go for you guys. So excited about that. I do this quite often for myself when there are days that I'm a little bit unsure what I wanted to do next. I prepare scrappy panels for myself because later on I can cut any shapes out of it and make beautiful scrappy quilts. In just a moment I'm gonna show you some of the projects that you can make. So right now we just have a scrappy panel. I'm gonna take my ruler and I'm gonna place it right over. When I sew all my strips together, my panel should be 4.5. If it's not exactly 4.5, it's gonna be time to trim it from the top and the bottom. If it's bigger, if it's too small, you need to sew one more strip to it so you have enough to cut a little rectangle out of it. If you have followed 1/4 inch seam allowance, 8 strips sewn together will give you exactly 4.5. I'm a little shy on my 1/4 inch seam allowance, so my panel is just tiny bit bigger, and this fun ruler is 4.5 width, so I can just place it and say to myself, okay, I'm gonna be doing a little bit of trimming. We're gonna start by, I'm gonna place this in front of me. We're gonna start by first trimming the edge, and don't trim too much. You want it just enough. All right, perfect. We trimmed it, beautiful. And I just want you to pay attention. Make sure that the lines right here in your ruler are laying with the seams. Okay, so when you trim it, not only look the top and the bottom, but especially I want some of the lines in the middle of my panel to match the seam. This one worked out quite nice. So now we're gonna start cutting our first spool. Our spool body right here going to be a 3.5 by 4.5. 3.5 by 4.5. So I'm gonna first worry about 3.5. I'm not worried about the top and the bottom at this moment, only the sides, 3.5. And I'm paying attention where my lines from my numbers right here are going up. They're matching with my middle seam especially. Why am I paying attention to this? Because I don't want to cut my spool this way. I want it to be perfectly square. So that's just like we cut a strip and match that bottom line and it's 90 degrees here. The same we're going to do right here. Nice straight cuts, not worry about anything else. 3.5. I cut one, then I'm gonna go ahead and cut another one and another one and another one, and I'm gonna end up with a lot of nice spool rectangle like the center of my spool. This is gonna be great. For now I'm just gonna cut 2 to show you what I do next. Once I cut this, it's not ready yet. I have to now trim from the top and the bottom to make this a perfect unit. So what I'm going to do, it's 4.5. Half of 4.5 is 2.25. So 1, 2.25, and coincident, this Creative Grids ruler has a white line right through the middle. That's the line I'm gonna place it on my middle seam, and that will allow me equally trim from the top and the bottom to create a beautiful, beautiful spool. Look at this. Isn't that cute? All right, another one. And I tell you, over the years, I've just noticed that every single spool trims just a tiny bit different. It takes a lot of practice to get it exactly. So top, bottom, I turn this unit and I'm paying attention. This line, middle line, everything matching. Double check. Cut twice, measure, cut once, measure twice. So that's what we want to do. All right, now notice it. There are 2 exact the same, but if I flip upside down, I already have a little bit different looking spool body. And now it's time for our next step. So we just made those little cute spool body. I'm gonna grab one of them and bring it to you. Next step that we have to do, we need a background for the sides. So I'm going to cut 2 rectangles for each side of my spool. Then I'm going to need a rectangle for the top, rectangle for the bottom, and 4 adorable squares for each corner of my spool. I'm gonna place those right on the top, just like this, here and here. And I'm going to now take my pencil, take my ruler, and draw a line. Where do I draw the line? I draw it from this point to this point, just diagonally, just like this. And now in opposite direction from the center out on this side. Look what I am doing. Just drawing like this. Oh, this looks wonderful. And notice it. Remember, in our last class we learned that we not only match point to point, but we also take the 45-degree angle and put it next to the edge of our square, and that gives us perfect half square triangle lines. So now we're drawing. Super. I already have one drawn right here. Perfect. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my cute little pins and just put it next to it to keep everything in place. Keep everything in place just like this here. And you can put a pin from either side. I'm just gonna put it from one side and get ready, set, go for sewing. Oh, this is gonna be beautiful. And I will prepare those. And I also need to now sew this to this. I'm gonna take a rectangle, place it right over, zoom, 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 finish, flip it open, and what is very important, seam allowance will go towards the light. Then I'm gonna place the rectangle on this side, sew it, flip it open, again seam allowance towards the light. This part is done. Now we're gonna sew this and this. Now notice how this and this are opposite, the top and the bottom, but when you turn this and rotate like this, those are exact the same unit. They're just placed in the bottom, rotate and place in the top and the bottom of the spool. So I place them right next to me, and I'm going to start sewing from here straight out. Zoom, 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 trim this open, flip it open, do the same thing from here straight out. Why do I start sewing from this point? Because I don't want to, with my needle and my thread, push this point down. It's easier for me to hold my finger on each side like this. Zoom, 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 done. Another one sewn. Then I would have gone to this side and sew from here down, and the same with here, from here down, and I have my tops and the bottoms sewn for my beautiful spool. I have ones already done, ready, set, go for you guys. So excited. Now notice it. We sew the sides, push seam allowance towards the outside. Super. Now we have just finished sewing the triangles. We're gonna trim it. We're gonna trim part of it, staying 1/4 inch away from the sewn line, and then when you push your seam allowance, you're gonna push it towards the dark. I know you're gonna want to push it the other way, but try it my way just this one time. I'm telling you, it's gonna be so nice for our next steps. This is the bottom. Now notice they're both the same, and all that I'm doing is just rotating, and now I have a top and a bottom for my spool. Look how quickly we did this. So proud of you. I hope you playing along and quilting and getting things done. Now, this is a little bit tricky. I wanted to show you this. This is the most common question I get, and something girls get stressed about it. I do not want you to get stressed. I want you to have fun with me and quilt and enjoy your journey in quilting. So notice, when I take this piece and I put it next to it, this doesn't match. Don't worry about it. You don't have to match it here. We have to match here where the 1/4 inch seam allowance is. So I'm gonna take this, place it right over, and now notice, because I push my seam allowance towards the dark, towards here, I can feel it and I can almost see it through that fabric where the crossing of my threads is. Right here, notice it. See? Right there. This is where I want your point to be. Right there. I'm just going to take my pin and put it right through, right here, where I can see the crossings of my fabrics, the seams right there. And you can take your pin even and you can feel it where this little fold is under there. So it's easier to pin one side. Now I need another pin. Again, if I need to see it, I will bend it this way. Look what happened. It's perfectly crossing. So I'm gonna put my pin right here, and then with the beautiful 1/4 inch seam allowance, zoom, 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 I'm gonna stitch down, do the same thing on this side, zoom, 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 flip it open, and my threads, my spools and the thread is gonna match beautiful right here. See it? So when you have that 1/4 inch, do you see 1/4 inch folded down? So right there we're gonna have a nice transition and beautiful spools with nice points right here. Not everyone is gonna work out perfect, but do not quit. Just keep going. Any technique that you ever do, the more you do it, the better you get in it. So maybe first or the second one are not going to be exactly perfect, but that's okay. It's fine. It's just antique spool. So just keep going. That's the most important part, and you can make multiple beautiful spools. And in this case, what I did is once I finish my beautiful spools, I decide I'm going to put them into a beautiful quilt. And in my quilt I have rectangles that are cut from the same background fabric, and I put my spools into rows and offset them and stack them up. And what I did is then add a light border and add a little bit of quilting. And I noticed with this quilt how important it is to use the right bedding for your quilt. I use a Tuscany Collection cotton wool blend. It's one of the newest beddings from Hub's Beddings. Oh girls, absolutely amazing. Notice the quilting, how it puffs, how beautiful it looks. And I didn't have time to do a custom quilting. Sometimes when I don't have time to do a custom quilting, I use designs that I can fit in a rows. It's an edge to edge design, but it's a row by row. And I have beautiful feathers here and beautiful braids, and they give me a little bit more to the quilt, but I didn't have to do custom and guide the machine, so that worked out quite nice. I want to quickly show you another quilt right here. Notice how beautiful this quilt is, and the quilting in it, because of that fun bedding, that wool, a little bit mix of wool with cotton gives you a little loft, so all of the design puff really nice. But I promise to show you some other things with Scrappy Panels. So I told you guys that I always love to make Scrappy Panels, and I brought one that I have it at home, that I do it all the time. This is the size that I like to do. Like a 12.5 inch, 12 inch, it's a good size. It's very durable. And this one is made from variety of strips. So if I have strips leftovers from log cabin, or if I got some new fabric and just want to use a strip, or I did a strip exchange, I sew them and then put them into a beautiful panel. Notice I start already cutting things out of that panel, and I brought a fun template. I can place my template and start cutting my pieces one after the other to create something fun and exciting. You're gonna ask me if all the strips going to have to be the same width. No, there's no rules to Scrappy Panel. You just make it, you press it, then you take a template and you cut it. And look what I did from this one. All of those beautiful 60-degree low diamonds. Look what happened with them. They're spinning and dancing, and it's a lovely quilt, and they're all from scraps and just low leftovers. I also brought for you another quilt I wanted to show you. And this one is the Spool Quilt that we just made. Look at that. This one has a different background. So if you do a lighter background, the fabric's gonna bounce forward. It's gonna be very crisp, a little bit a modern feel to it. If you do a batik, a tea-dye, bunch of scraps, this is gonna end up to be a lovely quilt. This one is set on the same way. The only different, I have an applique border on this quilt, and this would be more in one of our next classes that we take together. Maybe we should talk about some applique and some fun stitching. The applique in this quilt is done with my applique silhouettes as stencils, and this quilt was published in one of my books called Friendship, Strips and Scraps. Thank you so much for stopping by and quilting with me. I had so much fun making variegated threads. I hope you enjoyed the class, and make sure you visit our website at laundrybasketquilts.com. We love to hear from you, and have a wonderful day and happy quilting.